Hi there, welcome back for another Cyclestorm deep dive, such as it is. This time, I'd like to examine the card Prismatic Strands and some of our available tactics to beat it. And my primary goal here is to just explain why, when I am up against this card, my eye turns toward Repository Scob and Dispel rather than Flaring Pain. In this video, I've got 3 different games to look through, and I'm going to fast forward to the start of a combo turn. The point is not to get into the nitty-gritty of all of the micro decisions of these games, but to look at specifically how we interact with strands, and how we have the tools built right into the deck to beat it with a little bit of creativity. All right. The first game is going to be a game 1 situation against Cogate, and then the other 2 games are going to be games 1 and 2 of the same match versus Boros Synth deck. All right, see you in a bit. All right, so here we are on turn 4 of a game versus a very good player on Cogate. Now, they recognize that for them to win in a matchup like this, they need to actually get on board and get a clock going, which in this case for them was they wanted to get the Palace Sentinel on the ground. But really the clock that I'm concerned about here is if they start getting away with card advantage, they can put up a wall of counters that without any interaction, because we're in game 1, it's going to be really hard for us to fight through. So even though they have managed to discard a Strands on both turns with their Modern Age, this is a window where we can make something happen to win the game. So, like I said, I'm not going to go through every nitty-gritty detail. We're just going to start to go off on this turn. I'll try and pause at an appropriate time to start discussing the relevant points as far as their strands are concerned. So, cycle, reaping, make mana, blah, 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 right? Nothing terribly interesting going on here. Okay, more mana. Got the reaping, so we're doing fine here. Now, basically, what we want to do, and versus basically what we want to do is we need to just play a stinger out at some point to get them to use their strands. You want to do that particularly if you're playing against a player that's not very familiar with the deck. You want to do that with enough resources such that if they do allow that stinger to resolve, you do have enough mana and draw to be able to just win right there. But of course, Carves is a good player. He's not going to let us win that easily. So he casts the Strands. All right, here we are. We've got a decent amount of mana. We've got 2 red sources, even if we don't draw the Celebrant. So we're in a position here where we're just going to cycle. We want to just get a little bit more mana so that we can play out a couple more creatures. So there, we drew into the songs, so we're good to go. So now, when it comes to playing out creatures, the important thing is to have a diversity of colors in the creatures that you play out. So you're obviously going to play out all your stingers because that gives you instant speed damage, which is great. And then if you're looking for a creature that has the most damage dealing potential, it's going to be horror. If you're in a situation where you need to be able to block, Vantasaur goes up in stock. In the case where you really want to be absolutely sure you're going to win, you could, in this case, draw a little bit further to get the Scob and then really basically play out all your creatures. But of course, you do run the risk of the fail case of the Scob being very close to the bottom of your library, and then and that's one of the reasons I like to have two post board against a Strands is to make sure that you have access to that without running the risk of decking yourself. That allows you to truly play out just about everything. Where here, if they are able to stall us long enough, they could theoretically win. But in this position, they're at 20 life. I believe they don't have a cat or anything like that to gain it. They don't have a cat with double gate or something like that to gain a ton of life. I think that we have this with this amount of board presence. So we'll see. So here they're just digging, probably to look for the third Strands and or removal. All right, so they've got one of our horrors. So now here we're going to attack with both of our horrors. Now here I probably made a minor mistake. I probably shouldn't have cycled. I probably should have waited for them to cast the Strands instead of recycling. So I do believe this was a mistake on my part. So here they cast the Strands because that basically countered those three stinger triggers, where if we had basically forced them to play the Strands and name a color before any of this happened, we could have, saved that bolt effectively and been able to use it. But here we just cycle all of the remaining cards we have with that Strands on the stack to basically bolt them twice in this position. And I play out the Celebrant honestly as a blocker, just in case they want to, if they draw a second gate or something like that and they want to try to race us. So here they have another piece of removal for one of our horrors. And now here, because we've got the teachings in the yard and they're tapped out, we can actually, we have a lot of live draws here. And of course, we get rewarded pretty well with that draw. We can go for a songs off the teachings, and we basically just have the kill without even the horror connecting. So this just goes to show you don't need to kill on your combo turn. You can spread that out over the next couple turns. And this also just shows why it's important to pick your spots versus counter decks and pick the spots where they have made the calculated decision that they need to get on board, giving us the window to deploy a board presence of our own. Right, on to the next match. All right, here we are on turn 7. We did kind of a mini reaping earlier on where we just kind of kept our resources and dug deeper into the deck. but didn't have quite enough to kill. So we didn't want to run the risk of fizzling then, and we wanted to keep as many spells as we could. So here's the start of our turn 7. They have been representing Strands all game long, so I feel totally certain that they have it. And in this situation, they have the ability to play Strands or Bolt our Scob, which is nice that they don't have a fourth mana. So here we're going to go for it. Got plenty of Storm here, which is nice. Again, like I said, I'm not going to go into all of the micro decisions of optimizing the combo. I just am going to try to fast forward to the parts that relate to playing through Strands. So here we are, just cycling along, looking to run that balance of getting plenty of mana. Here's a case, a relevant point. We've got a bunch of Street Wraiths. This is a case where playing out a healer is actually both mana and draw advantageous because we would have been, priced out of using our Street Wraiths / cycling down below bolt range if we were to use them. And we want to be able to use them multiple times, so playing out that healer is definitely a high EV play in a situation like that. And it is an attacker too for playing versus Strands. So this is an interesting point where if they want to forego their Strands, they could bolt the Scob, but my guess is they're going to hold the Strands open, and they do. So here we've got so much mana, so much draw, and we've got the Celebrant in the yard from before, so that means we can play out cards of any color. Here, if memory serves, I just play out a Stinger, and they play the Strands, and then then one of the things that you may or may want to do then is at a bare minimum play out the Scob on this turn to bring back songs, because that means that you on their upkeep have the ability to with just a single swamp up kill at instant speed. But you don't, depending on whether you're going to whether there's a clock on you, you can just wait and chill on that too, and try to respond to them rather than the other way around. So you're always advantaged then. So here we are, just playing out a bunch of Vantasaurs, a bunch of Stingers. We happen to not draw any horrors, weirdly enough, in the top 3/4 of the deck roughly, or even more than that, but whatever, it's totally fine. So here we are with some life, two Stingers, two healers out, so Street Wraith is life neutral, handful of Cyclers in hand, and a Songs in hand. Don't forget about Ash Barrens too. It can cycle, but in this case, because we've got creatures, we're just gonna hold on to the creatures. So here, one of the things that's nice about just passing until they have attacked or decided whether or not to attack. Well, I guess they played an untapped creature, but here they have to decide how many creatures to leave back in terms of flashing back Strands. So obviously they probably wanted to attack with that Seeker, In a certain way, that telegraphs to me that they have a Strands in hand that they didn't attack with that Seeker, right? So here on their end step, um, we can just, I'm not sure what, I probably just pass here. Or maybe I cycle, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I cycle my Street Wraiths. I'm just kind of um, trying to see if they'll bite on that, flashing back that Strands. So now we just need to resolve, like, we have a ton of attackers of a variety of colors. So they can't let much of that come through, and we at instant speed can bolt them with a cycler. So we're in a position that's really hard for them to play around, even though they probably have 3 copies of Strands in this circumstance, right? So here we are attacking with all our creatures. Bear in mind that we only have 3 cards left in our library, so we want to make sure that we don't deck ourselves. Now here they cast Strands. Now we cycle. So that's a bolt on the stack. We play a ritual. They cast Strands again. We've saved our songs. We can play our songs now. Now we've got plenty of mana. We cycle. And that's the game. Right? Nothing, we weren't even really sweating here. Now, important to note, if they had, instead of spent the time holding up Strands, had just raced us, they might have actually won on an earlier turn, just through pressure. But it's important to lean into exploiting the weaknesses of them playing to what they see as their out, and stalling them out on their aggression as much as possible to be able to draw into this kind of a win. All right, one more one more game, which is the second game of this match actually, and to showcase the power of Dispel versus Strands. Okay, here we are for our turn 4 again. This time, as with the last game, they're representing Strands. But we have enough material in our yard, spells in hand, to potentially go for a win here. Or I think maybe I draw a ritual off of the Phantasaur or something like that. Yeah, that's what it was. So now we have the tools to go for a win for sure. So here we are. Got plenty of life for Street Wraiths here, which is nice. So we've drawn into a Dispel, which is interesting. It means that we can potentially beat the Strands with that, though of course they have an untapped creature, so they could just play it again. So that's not a win versus Strands yet. It would be had they, discarded off of, I don't know. Does Boros play any discard spells right now? Probably not, because they're just leaning into the synth plan. But you get the point. Oftentimes, a singles Dispel is enough to win. In this case, not. So that being said, even if we don't draw our second Dispel, we can do what we did in the last game and just get functionally infinite mana and play out a bunch of creatures and win that way, assuming we gain some life, obviously, because we don't really want to let them untap with multiple red sources and us being at 5. So here we drew into the second Dispel, and we've got the Celebrant in play, which means we got plenty of blue mana, and that basically means we've got this game. So here we're just playing out this healer so that we can cycle Wraiths, either draw into another Songs or into the Scob, and then we'll have the win for sure. So there's our Songs. Here we play out our first Stinger. We get the Dispel off, they flash it back, get the Dispel, and we've won the game. All right, so why am I harping on this issue that Dispel and or Scob are more important than Flaring Pain? And fundamentally, it comes back to just, basic combo theory that you really don't want to have bricks in your deck. And Flaring Pain is basically the quintessential brick. If you have the understanding that you can beat Strands with tools that are built into the deck itself. Dispel is a different category. Dispel is a card that is an interactive spell that can either, in the context of Cogate, help us actually punch through their counters and actually start to combo, and or in the case of Boros, it's a spell that can protect our Scob, which is, again, very important in the early turns, in the early part of comboing to actually get to a point where we can win. And so the trick with all of this, though, is that it's really hard to be honest with ourselves about the effect of putting a brick in our deck, right? It looks great when you just draw it in the bottom, quarter of your deck and you just win, right? But it doesn't necessarily feel as bad as it should feel when it's in your hand instead of a cycler, instead of a ploy even, instead of, a teachings, where it would have instead maybe gotten you that one card deeper that would have gotten you that dark ritual that would have then allowed you to cycle 3 cards and get the Songs and then have enough mana to actually be in a position to win. So there's always an opportunity cost with putting bricks into your deck. That's why, for me, I really like Dispel and Vision Charm as my primary interactive spells, because they have such a broad applicability in their utility across a variety of matchups. And within the same matchup, a broad utility of different roles that they can play depending on the moment in the game. I recognize, of course, that there are better specific cards for a lot of those specific roles, like, for instance, Pyro or Steel Sabotage, or even some of the splashed artifact destruction spells. But that, for me, is not what's important here. What's important is having a card that's useful in a broad variety of game states. Scob is another example of that, where it really puts your mana into overdrive in the late game and allows you to just cast your whole deck if you want to, but also and also makes it so you don't have to draw so far into your deck to be able to do that, to maintain cards in deck so you don't deck yourself. But also it has the upside benefit of, if you draw it in the right time early in a game, it can just steal wins, where Flaring Pain is never going to steal you a win on turn 3. It just never is going to happen. So that's why I want to prioritize cards like that rather than very niche bricks that are only situationally useful. Now, what I can say is that if you have a concern about going to time, which is certainly possible if you're unfamiliar with the interface on with some of these strats, that's the only reason that I would run Flaring Pain, on MTGO, is if you're concerned about going to time, implementing some of these strategies. But in all other cases, I believe the opportunity cost is way too high to include that in your 60 when you submit a deck. So hopefully some of that was interesting. I know it covered a lot of ground, maybe got rambly, but if you've got any questions, hit me up. Have a good one. Bye.